We start with a point. Hi everybody, my name is Rob Bryant and this is the Imagining the 10th Dimension video blog. Just a reminder, you can always read along with these blogs. I provide links to them, and of course there's always new entries. I'm often way ahead in the text versions of this blog from the video blog version, so if you'd like to read something new right now, just go to 10thdimension.com/blog. And I guess while I'm talking about links here, don't forget I do have a Twitter feed. If you'd like to subscribe to me, it's at 10THDIM. Same name as my YouTube channel. Today's entry is called Our Universe as a Point. We start with a point, the first phrase of the animation that vaulted this project to worldwide popularity 4 years ago now. We end with a point. That's the conclusion that's reached at the end of the same animation. If the 10th dimension in its unobserved state is indeterminate, then it's just like the point we started from. You are the point. That was the title of a blog entry I published earlier this year. If our reality is defined across 10 dimensions, then the 5th dimension would be the halfway point, the node of strongest harmonic resonance for all the vibrations and energy that combine together to create the unique now that we are each witnessing at this moment. As we've discussed in entries like the holographic universe and holograms and quanta, realizing that our reality is created through constructive interference at the 5th dimension is the key to understanding all of the wide-ranging ideas that we've been exploring with this project. Einstein believed our reality is defined at the 5th dimension. Do you? By itself, a point is of indeterminate size and dimension. As we discussed not long ago in 1 to the power of infinity, it's important to realize that indeterminate is not the same as undefined. Things that are indeterminate can also be thought of as being true for any value you care to assign to them. What does this mean? By the time you use a point to indicate a position within a multidimensional space, as you imagine all the sizes that the point could be within its indeterminate range of sizes, a circle, 2D, or a sphere, 3D, is the shape it takes for anything between the infinitely large or the infinitesimally small versions of that point. This logic continues with the additional dimensions, but while we've spent some time in past blogs looking at rotating hypercubes, a hypercube being the 4D equivalent of a 3D cube, we've never looked at the 4D equivalent of a 3D sphere, the hypersphere. Now, I'm putting up some mind-blowing animations that were created by somebody calling themselves WildStar 2002 on YouTube. I'll put up a link to his channel. The fella's name is Bert Clausen. He's from Salt Lake City, Utah, and he's a graphic and web design student. Because of his interest in higher dimensional geometry, he figured out a way to do these hypersphere animations using MaxScript in 3D Studio Max. Thanks, Bert. These are really interesting to look at in the context of the conversation we're having here. In entries like an expanding 4D sphere and finite but unbounded, we've talked before about these connections between hyperspheres and visualizing the extra dimensions of our reality. 2 entries ago, we discussed our universe within the omniverse, in which we looked at some new scientific theories advanced in the last couple of months, suggesting that all possible universes are connected to each other by point-like black holes. Then last entry, we looked at our universe as a dodecahedron. In that blog, we returned to the work of Dan Winter and showed this simple animation from his gigantic Golden Proof webpage. After I published my look at the dodecahedron last week, Dan sent me this note. Nice to have a general intro there. Now you need to add this simple, essential statement. After the limited number of axes of rotation which can be contained in cubic lattice, 3D, the only way rotating axes of charge can be superposed with the necessary constructive wave interference is the way a 5 cube rotates into a dodecahedron. The so-called hypercube, producing the golden ratio edge, is the only next dimension, 4 there. Then by ratcheting that down a helix, precisely mapping DNA, you have the 5 axes of rotation superposed, 5D. Recursive braiding adds spin axes superposed and longer wavelengths to that, where thus DNA is the only biologic structure with access to the 10 plus dimensions. See how 7 plus 5 makes 12 in DNA. I'll put up the link to that at goldenmean.info, DNA Manifesto. And also, the 7-5 spin is the essential symmetry recipe, the slip knot, of hydrogen, heart muscle, and solar core, as well as DNA. Other interesting pages from Dan's huge body of work include this one on the cause of gravity, goldenmean.info/self-organization, and this one on the source of life, goldenmean.info/new science of life. And finally, if you have 48 minutes, you'll find an interesting movie on this page I'm putting up a link to showing Dan speaking at a retreat in Spain, goldenmean.info/phase conjugate visuals. On Dan's Golden Proof page, he ties the golden ratio in not just with the Poincaré dodecahedral space, which we looked at last time as the underlying shape of our universe, but with other topics we've looked at in the last year or two. Garrett Lisi's E8 rotation, which we're looking at a picture of here, which is a bold framework for showing how all the possible particles and forces of our universe are organized, and which Dan explained also incorporates the golden ratio. On the same page, Dan also relates his work to the ideas of Nassim Haramein. I've remarked before that Nassim is fond of dismissing ideas of extra dimensions, including his insistence that the first and second dimension don't exist, which would seem to tell us that his ideas are completely incompatible with mine. Nassim tells us that there is only one dimension, and that our observed universe is connected by points to all other realities by fractal patterns that can be infinitely divided or infinitely expanded. Where would such an idea tie into what we're talking about here, in the fifth dimension, which I've been saying all along is really where our reality is defined, one Planck frame at a time to create the four-dimensional line of time we look back upon from our vantage point as creatures made of 3D atoms and molecules. One of the things I've been fond of saying is that life is any process that is interested in what happens next. With Dan's idea of DNA being the only pattern that connects us to the extra dimensions, we have another interesting way of seeing how our now is not riding on the single constrained train track of our linear one-way arrow of time, but is being created one point after another from a fifth-dimensional probability space. Visualizing the extended possibilities of this now is something we can talk about in an upcoming entry called the Fifth Dimensional Camera Project. Okay, so next time we'll talk about my interview with Kelly Howell on her popular radio show and podcast, Theater of the Mind. That's all for now. My name's Rob Bryanton. Enjoy the journey.